Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and there's over 200 of them that are free to you. Porch Play Chats are just conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, be a friend on our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, magically, every Monday morning, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch today is Kisa Marx. Kisa, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Hi,
Kisa,
Deb. Thanks for having me.
oh, so happy. Kisa's an early childhood practitioner and an advocate with over 2 decades. You look way too young in the field. Oh my goodness. She's most passionate, and I'm really interested in learning about this Play Lab. She's most passionate about her purposeful role in founding the Play Lab Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides humanity centering, self affirming, high quality care for every child. Oh, I have chills all over my body just reading that. And so I really want to learn more about that. But the title of your session today, or your Porch Plat chat today, is Why Are We Still Here?
Yep.
Ooh, that's a provocative title. Let's dive in. Why are we still
Good.
here?
Yeah. Well, so this comes on the heels. In my neighborhood, we have a wonderful library. It's like the anchor to our community, and they walk the talk. So they're really into inclusion and have always been. And it's a library for everyone, right? Well, they were just in this huge controversy because the board president wanted to, or executive director wanted to get rid of DEI. And so that would wipe out all of the inclusive programming and staff that kind of push the needle towards change, right?
Mm.
So it's interesting that we wind up talking about why are we still here? Why are people coming to kind of undermine the advancement of inclusive practices? So, yeah.
And isn't it sad? It was really interesting. I was talking to a couple of librarians like 4 or 5 months ago,
Mhm.
and I looked at them and I said, I never thought they would come after you, right?
I've
I
never.
it never in that people would feel so, I don't know if it's threatened.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not
I
them.
feel
So
like
I don't
threatened
know.
is an appropriate word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it just seems so crazy
Mhm.
to me, not to them, but it seems
Mhm.
so crazy to me that we would see children's books as a threat to humanity. I've been telling my husband for the last, I don't know, 6 years, we need to get bumper stickers that say, think human, right? Please, just
First.
let's just think
First.
human, right?
Yes.
Because we seem to be isolated
Mhm.
who's a human and who isn't a human.
Yeah.
And so, this controversy over books and what books are teaching is really a them thing that is
Mhm.
becoming an us thing, which is
Yeah.
what is really disturbing me. That we're having to to push back books in a library that need to be there so children can feel like they belong, right? That
Yeah. And
I
belonging is what it's all about. What it's all
it
about, right?
is building
Yeah.
relationships and belonging.
Mhm.
And so this whole thing of um, fearing the other when the other is a human is something that's really confusing to me.
It
And
is. And
some of it is ideological and some of it is political, but
mhm.
just if we could just get to, you know, where where is this bubbling up from? And why is this such an issue for people? And
Yeah.
and what are some ideas to help? Like, what was the response at the library when they were wanting to
Oh,
make a
it was pretty heavy. I just want to touch back on to what you just said. I feel like humanity itself and humanizing practices, that's political, right? Because if I see you as other,
Mhm.
then I can push my agenda. If we're all together, then it's like, oh, well, what are we fighting? What are we pushing up against? So it's very, very political to be divisive, and I don't want you to know that you're the same as that
Mhm.
other person.
Yeah.
And what we push in early childhood, you have your mirrors, your windows, your sliding glass doors, right? And that's all in a book. You're going to find all of those things in books. And so if we're pushing our political agenda, we don't want them to see that, if you have two dads, your family structure is the same. If you have a single mom, your family structure is the same. So it looks different, but people loving people and taking care of people, that's all universal. And they don't
Right.
want you to know that. So, yeah.
It isn't, and I think that is I think that is the saddest part to me, that
Hmm.
it when we're thinking about people who want to control what other people see, hear, and are able to do,
Hmm.
then we're recognizing that there are people who don't see everyone as worthy, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so then they're trying to close the windows
Hmm.
so that they don't want to live here anymore, or they want to be hidden because they're fearful. And all of those things are so impactful for children in the classroom. I one of the things that one of the courses I teach is children, families, and communities.
Hmm.
And one of the reflective journals that students need to really consider is what populations would be difficult for you to work with, right? So we do lots with culture, and we do lots with implicit bias, and we do lots with stereotypes, and we do lots. And then it sort of leads them up to this point where they really have to be reflective because it wasn't in their experience. And so to them, they see it as something that they may have a problem with. And then the prompt is, how are you going to recognize it's your stuff and support the family and the child? And so it's a very interesting way of helping them really begin to see more of the implicit bias that they hadn't yet recognized.
Yeah.
But ooh, I always tell a story of a, a family who was in our program, and
Hmm.
this was in the 90s. So
Okay.
that was a two mommy family.
Hmm.
And so the it this child was in kindergarten, and the teacher came running out and said, I need you. And I said, okay. So I went into the classroom, and she said, we're talking about our parents. And I said, wonderful. And I said, talk to me about your parents. And so they were going back around and repeating what they had just said. And she said, well, I have two mommies. And I said, well, that's wonderful. Some families have two mommies. Some families have two daddies. Some families have a mommy and a daddy. Some families have three or four mommies because they're stepmoms and stepdads
Hmm.
and blah, blah. And the
Yeah.
teacher just looked at me, and I said, everybody's family is different. And, and I said, do you have any questions? No, no, that's fine. Everybody's family is different.
Yeah.
I
It,
got up and walked out, and the teacher's looking at me like, what did just happen? How did that happen? It's it is definitely. And then I had a conversation with her later, and I said, why was that such a problem for you? And she said, well, I just don't believe in two mommy or two daddy families. And I said, I'm not trying to change your beliefs. I'm just telling you have to respect all families.
and that's the part. It's like, to be a good advocate, you have to do a lot of unearthing your own mess, right? Nobody
Right.
asks you what you believed in, what you didn't believe in. Do you see the humanity in that child? If you do, in her family, then you will bring those people in and say,
Yes.
you're welcome here.
please.
If you don't like it, don't marry a woman.
Right. Yeah.
Easy.
I'm not trying to change your values and beliefs. I'm just telling you that the child is the child with a family, and the family is welcome, right?
And the
So
family is always welcome. Always.
always welcome. And so it is, I think so much of it can be our stuff
It
that
is
we
always our stuff.
that
Always.
we haven't lifted, right? We haven't, and maybe we've been in a community that has the same values and beliefs, or we have friends that have the same values and beliefs. But and then when we're confronted by a different cultural's value and beliefs, I always tell my students, I mean, my culture as a Caucasian is much different than your culture as a Caucasian, and your culture as a person of color, and your culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and then we get up and we figure it out. We do the cross the line activity, which I think is really powerful for students, and recognizing that their stuff and their family is their family, but that doesn't apply to all families.
No.
And so I wonder how we can support teachers in in helping them understand that their stuff is their stuff, and our job is to support children and families, and how we best do that instead of criticizing or judging.
So what I lead with all the time is to give each other grace and space, right? We have to understand that we are not perfect. We have our own mess. We have our own biases. Everybody, regardless of race,
Everybody.
we all
Yep.
have our own biases, and we have to lead with that when we come into a space. If I come in and I'm talking about race and implicit bias and whiteness, you might get defensive, thinking, well, I'm not like that. I didn't grow up like that. But I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about whiteness. And whiteness affects everyone. I can do harm with white normative standards that have been ingrained in me, right? As a Black woman. So that is totally different. Put your guards down and realize that we're all, fighting the same fight. And once we do that, we can, be more vulnerable, be more willing to listen, more receptive, and then we can actually change something.
Yeah. And I think we can begin to really deal with this stuff that we were raised in. So I always say, and people have heard this 1,000 times, but I was raised in the most loving and nurturing family ever. Mom and dad, loving, nurturing, who were the most racist and discriminatory people. And I was the oops child. And so my siblings are much older. Like my sister, who died just last year, was 19 years older than I am. And she was the oldest.
Wow.
I was the youngest, right?
Okay.
So the generations that they were raised in were much different than the generation I was raised
in. Much more
and,
intolerant.
Oh my. And we lived in the very tip of Texas. So right on the Mexican border. And so I was a minority in my elementary school classes. And my friends, my great friends, were Hispanic, right? But I would come home and hear my parents, say these really, and I would just look at them and go, wait, those are my friends. Those are the people I play with at school.
Those are people I see the humanity in because we share space every day.
Yeah. And so, it was really hard. It was really hard. And I would call them out even when I was 10 or 12. I would say that they're my friends. That's what you're saying is not true about my friends. And so it can be very difficult to be able to step outside what you were raised in and be able to see that maybe the culture you were raised in is not what you want to bring forward into your own
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Because we have
And I
had
think
children.
that's what brought you here. This
Yeah.
is the reason that you can do that so well is because as a little girl, you started fighting.
Hmm.
And now you just walk around with a bullhorn and you can do it easily, you know.
I can call it out, but still, Harrison's talk yesterday made me realize, oh my God, there's still so much work to do
Yeah.
in for me, still so much work to do. But I do think we have to see people as worthy and human, and we are all different.
Mhm.
And so we have to embrace that difference. I mean, if we were all widgets, none of us would be interesting.
No.
Everybody's
No.
everybody's life is
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
And so we have to embrace the differences instead of be fearful of them.
Mhm.
And so what else can we do? What else can we do to work on this stuff?
I, we have to normalize it. So stop running from it. The teacher who was scared to just have an open conversation about the two mommies, and she didn't want probably it was probably well intentioned. I'm gonna assume that she didn't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, so she brought you in. But if a child that had what I don't want to say normal, but we'll put that in quotations, a traditional family, mom, dad, if they said my mom and dad, you wouldn't be like, oh God, let me go get the principal. You would just listen to the conversation.
And so, and she realized that that was her stuff,
Hmm. Yeah.
but she just was so taken aback by it. And I mean,
Hmm.
we that that I'm glad she asked for support instead of saying something inappropriate. But ooh,
Right. Yeah.
that was a really aha moment for me. So we
Hmm.
had I didn't call her out, of course, but we said, how do we support every family, regardless of the family structure, right?
Yes.
So we started talking about, let's talk about your family structure when you were growing up. And so, and
Hmm.
everybody had a different, it wasn't just mommy and daddy. It might have been mommy, daddy, stepmom, stepdad, right? And
Grandma, uncle,
grandma,
foster parents.
uncle. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it wasn't the what we see as the typical,
There is
family.
no typical.
There is no typical
Everything is different.
family.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hmm.
is different. Every family
Hmm.
looks different. And so the other thing that was really one of my aha moments long ago in a land far, far away is, how you get the flannel stories of the white family and
Hmm.
the flannel stories of the black family and the flannel stories of the Hispanic family and the flannel stories of the Asian family and
Yeah.
the Native American or
Hmm.
families. And I said, so this isn't what families look like.
No.
So what are some ideas you have for how we can take all these families that are from one ethnicity or race, and how can we create it so that children feel comfortable that their family isn't just the white family or the black family or the Hispanic family? And they would say, but then the pieces will get mixed up. And I said, yeah, because children
Point.
have different families. Like, it was like a big, this is in the 90s. So
Hmm.
this was a big thing back
Hmm.
back then. And so I mean, we had to brainstorm solutions, and then we finally decided, oh, well, we'll just put all the mommies in one bucket and all the daddies in another bucket and all the babies in another bucket and all the grandmas in another bucket, and
Hmm.
then children can make their own families. Wow, there
Yeah.
we go. But again, that's we see that they come to us in a package. That doesn't mean it has to stay in the package
In the
that
package. Yeah.
yeah. So, there's things that we need to lift up. And if those of you who are listening to this chat, if there's things you want to lift up, send me an email so that we can lift those up. Because I think the more we have these conversations, the more normative it becomes.
Yes.
And it's and hopefully the more comfortable you feel in talking about these issues and recognizing that, some of this stuff is yours and some of this stuff is other people's, right? So
Mhm.
we have to Have to really think about that.
And some of it is a product of shame. And you
Mhm,
build shame when you don't know
mhm,
what you're carrying is normal. You
mhm.
don't know that it's a part of the human experience. And
Yeah.
so it's so important that we make space for conversation, for nuance, period. I
Mhm.
love to hang out in the gray area because that's where everybody else is.
Yes.
Nobody is black or white. Everybody's somewhere in the middle.
Mhm,
And so we have to make space in our classrooms in particular, in our learning spaces, for
mhm,
nuances, for the non-traditional family, for the young parent, for the neurodiverse family, for the neurodiverse parents,
mhm.
for the financially insecure, for the trauma informed. We have to make nuances. Everybody doesn't come from the straight line. No one comes from it. Everybody has some form of mess. Period.
Mhm.
So
And
let's
it's
make room for
okay.
it.
It's okay
Yeah,
to talk
it's
about it.
okay.
And it's okay to ask for help, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do in this situation.
Mhm.
I need to talk through with somebody. Don't be ashamed of it.
Mhm.
Pat yourself on the back that you're willing to talk about it and make
Mhm.
yourself vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because I think the other people say, oh, I don't want to admit that maybe I don't know how to respond to this. Well, that's the only way we learn. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many times when I go, oh, Lord, gotta read an article on that or talk to somebody about this. And one of the big things for me is when I married my husband.
Mhm.
So this is my second and final marriage.
Mhm.
And we've been married for like 12 or 14 years. I was married the
Mhm.
first time for 21 years. So
Oh, wow. Mhm.
um uh when I married my husband, he had three teenage children,
Mhm.
and one of those teenage children has is transgender from girl to boy.
Mhm.
And so that wasn't something I knew a lot about. And so I had to learn, talk, work through my stuff in wanting to be supportive and loving and nurturing while I was trying to deal with something that I didn't understand. And
You knew
so,
nothing about.
oh, nothing.
Yeah.
It had never, in my 13 and a half years as a director, I'm sure I had children who didn't feel like they were born in the right body.
Oh, I know
I'm
I have. I
Yeah,
know
I'm
I
sure
have.
I
Yeah.
did. I
That
I
came
don't
out and said these things that like no, no, no. I am a girl and they presented as a boy, or like
yes,
teeny tiny people who have now grown up to identify as that
yes.
gender. So yeah.
But and so I know I had them and I hope they felt supported.
Yeah.
But it was like, you know, uh, I it was a challenge for me. And I would talk to Richie about it. Richie, this is really challenging for me. Help me understand blah blah blah. So and then I would talk to friends who were much more better informed than I was on it, and they would say, you know, and the biggest part was even though I tried, I couldn't change the pronoun.
So I find that it, well, okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit. One, I think the perspective is different. My perspective is different because I do come from the global majority. So I
Mhm,
have that, my mind can code switch of how people can't understand my way of living.
mhm,
So whereas when I was in college, I always knew my father was a closeted gay man, so I always knew about that perspective.
mhm,
Even when I didn't, it was just a part of my world. So when
mhm,
I didn't have names for it, so I knew that. But when I got to college, I went to an arts college when I transferred over, and there was talk about transgenders. I knew nothing, no thing about it. It was so foreign to me. I was
mhm.
just like, wait, what? What is this?
What's
This
that?
is too much. This is too much. But because of my background, I'm like, well, it's my job to inform myself.
Mhm,
And so what I started doing, that was when social media was really, really taking off. And I just started following pages and in following people's journey and reading people's books. And now it
yeah.
doesn't occur to me like this is something I've always known. But no, 20 years ago. I knew nothing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's about the time this started bubbling up for me
Yeah.
too.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we recognize that we don't know something, ask for
Mm-hmm.
help. And that
Ask
I think
help. Mm-hmm.
that's the lesson that
Mm-hmm. Go to
we're
your
going to.
library.
Yes, go to your librarian and support them while you're there and say,
Yes.
I support you, please.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Help.
and you also have to be advocates for other people and not be afraid
Yeah.
of saying something when someone's not being appropriate. Sometimes I would say, did you just hear what you said? I need you to replay that in your head. I have these little phrases that I've come up with because I'm so shocked that I needed something that was a canned phrase I could pull out of my brain when someone said something that was discriminatory or harmful to other people. And so my my go-to little response is, did you just hear what you said? And then that makes them stop and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And did you mean it that way?
Mm-hmm.
So we're able then to sort of start a conversation, and most of the time they'll say, oh my God, I can't believe that came out of my mouth.
Yeah. The best provocation that I've always had I got from children, and that is why.
Why? Mhm.
And just keep asking, why?
Why?
Why? But why? But
But
why? But and I'll keep going until you realize there's
until
an
you can
error.
get deep enough, yeah, until you
Yes.
can really get deep enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, ask yourself those questions too, if you don't feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable seeking it from someone else, but try to find the root of that thing that flew through your head that came out of your mouth that you can't believe you just said. And
Mm-hmm.
and asking yourself why is a really, really important thing. And I think the older we get, the more reflective we get.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree.
yeah. And so, you might need to practice that
Mm-hmm.
a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are still things that I realize, I'm old. So there are things that I realized that happened to me as a young child, even though I grew up in a wonderful, loving family. They happened to me as a young child that have triggered me for my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
That I now am able to go, oh, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
why.
say I say all the time I have a twin sister, and I say that my advocacy started with her
Uh-huh.
because where I'm very reserved and tend to be more introverted, she was really extroverted, extremely tall, very what they would call now ADHD, and I mean trauma upon trauma
Mhm.
from the time we were in nursery school.
Oh,
And so I learned how to speak up for others
mhm,
by defending her
mhm,
because she got in trouble often. And we had teachers who would just out and out. She's the dumb one. She's the loud one. She's the bad one. Uh, you know, and I was appalled. And even as a very reserved individual, I was like, no,
my
we're
sister.
not, that's my
Yeah.
sister, and we're not going to do that. And so I learned at a very young age what I learned about justice, right? I learned what was fair and what was unfair. And through my privilege, because I got safe passage, really because I was quiet and compliant, right? So through that privilege and the attention that I got from the teachers, I was able to say, that's not right.
Mhm.
And I
And
kept doing it.
able to speak the truth, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because you were protecting your sister. So
Mm-hmm.
as we wrap up, and this has been amazing, and we need to have more of them because these kinds of challenges I think teachers face every day.
Yeah.
And we need to find ways to support them in with strategies
Mm-hmm.
that will help them not only identify what's within them
Mm-hmm.
or be able to confront in a loving and supportive way to other people who might be struggling with these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is a powerful Porch Play Chat for people to hear so
Mm-hmm.
that we can begin to lift up these issues more and more and more so that people have some strategies to
Mm-hmm.
use in their daily lives, because sometimes you just don't know what to say. You
You
just
don't.
don't. You,
You don't.
you're just
Mm-hmm.
like, what? What just happened?
Mm-hmm. And like you said before, the brain never forgets, right? There are
Right.
things that are going to trigger you, and that triggering is going to show up in your learning environment.
It is.
So it doesn't leave. It's
Mm-mm.
there. You thought you learned how to compartmentalize it, but somebody will teach you that it can be excavated in 2.3 seconds, and
And
you
it's
don't want
amazing
a bad
how fast it happens.
situation.
Yes,
Yes.
and it just flies through, and you're like, oh
Hmm.
my God, I thought I dealt with that stuff already. So, and just so with adults, of course, with
Hmm.
children, same thing.
Yeah.
And they're much
Same.
younger.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, you always have to look at what just happened that just triggered them, right?
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother Porch Play Chat. But we have to not, and it's so hard not to react. It's so hard not to be judgmental.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that's your stuff that
Yeah.
we have to sort of take a step back, ask ourselves why.
Why?
Why did that just happen?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
why did I just have that thought? Kisa,
Yeah.
thank you so very much. Stay
Yeah.
right there
Thank
while I close this out. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.